Hi, good morning, well, it's not morning where you are, but it's 6 a.m. for me. So I apologize for not having my camera on, but you can imagine how dark it is at 6 a.m. in winter. I'm calling in from Toronto, and I will be giving more of a architecture specific presentation today. So a little bit about myself that has already been covered. Um, I actually started my career at ATO Architects. ATO had a very sort of impactful vision to give me the role of BIM manager, and it has since curated a very interesting career for me over the years. Currently, I am the National AI Lead at Architecture 49, a Canadian-wide practice, which means I am leading the implementation of AI across the 6 major provinces where we have offices. And that entails a lot of research into not just the technology, but also the policy, because as a profession, we are liable for any misuses of technology on our projects. Um, my experience has already been mentioned. I just wanted to add that I am YouTube. If anyone would like to connect with me after this, my YouTube channel is called The BIM Mentor. I think the only thing that wasn't mentioned is I am teaching an AI course at the Toronto Metropolitan University for the Master of Architecture students, which offers a bit of insight into what AI is doing in the academic sector. I'm also an Autodesk expert elite, so I'd be showcasing some Autodesk products in addition to what Mr. Ayo said, and I'm a certified project management professional. A bit of my affiliations over the year, I've engaged in what I can only describe as a Canadian-wide tour of AI conferences and speaking opportunities, in addition to all the other work that has been mentioned. Everyone is interested in AI. I've had to present with the Royal Institute of Architects of Canada, Buildex Alberta, University of Manitoba, the Alberta Association of Architects. And for context, I am in Toronto. So these are all provinces that are quite far. I have to take a flight in terms of distance to discuss AI, but that is just to showcase the, and because we are using AI as a practice, there's a lot of interest as to the successes and failures that we've experienced. So I'll be sharing a bit of that insight today very quickly. As an introduction, we are here, the intersection between architecture, data science, and computer engineering. That is where AI lies. So there isn't a clear distinction anymore between someone who is a software engineer and someone who isn't in the world of AI. The technology has made everything accessible to everyone. And so in terms of what to expect in the near future, many people who aren't necessarily trained developers will be coming up with tools to solve their very specific problems. And I think that in a country where we are already sort of economically sort of challenged, I think that's the best way to describe it. AI provides a unique opportunity to create accessible tools that will solve some of the challenges that we may have ideas on. So the first thing I want to just emphasize, but I'm already listening to the conversation, so I know that I'm talking to a much more informed audience, is that a tool is not a body of knowledge. So a common misconception at the time when I was in Nigeria is that BIM is Revit. So just in that same vein, AI is not a specific tool. It is not Midjourney. It is not ChatGPT. It is not the tool that you use. It is a distinct body of knowledge. Just thought to mention that. The AI model is the thing that powers the tool. So a lot of people have rightly mentioned that Copilot and some of these other AI tools use the same model, and that is correct. So a key distinction is that the model is the underlying engine that is trained to perform specific tasks for the AI. And the tool is the user-facing application that leverages one or more AI models to deliver that same functionality. So that is a key distinction when you start to see different tools pop up in the near future. They may all actually be built on the GPT model, and there may be very little distinction as far as the model, but in terms of the user interface and what the tool does, that is where there's going to be some distinction. So just to sort of take a step back, AI has been around for a long time. I'm sure we've all seen AI in pop culture depicted usually as a humanoid robot with sentient, human-like intuitive capabilities and a questionable moral compass. Typically, AI is trying to end the world. I think out of most of these things, I'd say the AI we have today is not necessarily a robot. It's much more, it's something that you cannot really see. It's in all of our systems and all of our emails and all of our social media. I don't know about ending the world part. That remains to be seen. It may or may not. But I think that the first challenge, at least I've had when I've spoken to many audiences, is the assumption that AI will take some shape or form of a robot, but robotics and artificial intelligence are completely separate fields of study, even though there is some overlap. And so, how can a machine be intelligent is another question I tend to get, especially when we get these outputs from machines. There seems to be some level of trust built where you think you are speaking to an intelligent system. And so I just want to explain a bit of what actually happens under the hood. So the machines learn similar to how a baby or a human being learns. They are fed with a set of training data, and from there, they're able to establish patterns that are common across the data and use that to form what feeds back to us as intelligence. And just to highlight some of the people who actually brought us these systems, because it has been a very long road, a lot of them accidentally are actually Canadian. And so that has put a bit of pressure on the Canadian government to be a little bit more involved than most countries in terms of defining the next steps forward. The most famous person here, I think, is Geoffrey Hinton, who was a Nobel laureate, recently awarded a Nobel Prize for his work on AI. And he's often called actually the godfather of AI. I'm sure most of us know this man and some of the other people here, Sam Altman, founder of OpenAI. These are some of the people who brought us modern AI as we know it. But historically, AI has actually started since the 1950s. So what we have today is a very long journey, starting in the 1950s and experiencing what is most commonly known as AI winters, where there's a season of distrust and lack of access to funds, or lack of trust in the AI systems themselves. So I'm hopeful that we don't go into another AI once the current wave of interest has been established. However, I just wanted to point out that what we're experiencing is not the first time where there is sort of a spike in interest in AI. And just wanting to highlight some of the earlier AI systems, there was AI Eliza, which was literally pre-trained, kind of a typical chatbot with so you would feel like you're having a conversation, but this is all in the database. And so whenever you're asking a question that's not in the database, you don't really get a response. And then we moved on to things like BERT models that would guess what you are asking on, based on the probability. So to be or not to be, that is the something. And then the AI is weighing the probability of what you were actually looking to complete that sentence. What we have today is large language models, also known as LLMs, and they are built on transformer models, quite similar to the BERTs, but with a little bit more infrastructure to support the process, which is why they're much more impressive and gained a lot more popularity than the initial models of like the early the 1950s and 80s. So most people who are in this room probably already use ChatGPT. I just want to point out, because it's something that I found both in my research in academia and trying to create streamlined workflows for practice. GPT models take your sentences when you ask a question as tokens. So when you put these sentences into the tool, you as a human are conversing in human language, but the AI is reading them as tokens. And so these tokens have to have a sequence in a way that the AI reads a deeper, or what we call semantic meaning into what you're asking. So as an example, this is actually lifted straight from the ChatGPT website. If you say my favorite color is red, and my favorite color is red with a capital letter, to you as a person, you've said the same sentence. But one of the reasons why knowing how to ask for things from AI, or at least understanding how it weights that you're able to use AI. Why is this important? I think that over time, what we have in terms of accuracy from AI will improve, because that has been I think a challenge for anyone who's engaged with AI is that it's sometimes correct and sometimes not. That is because it's still sort of in training. And I believe that the idea is to get as many people using these tools as possible so that it can improve in responses. So I'm just going to move very quickly so that I can showcase some of the things that we've been doing as a practice, so that I don't waste too much time. But just as an example of the progression of AI, these are some early images that I generated with DALL-E in 2020 when it came out. And just as an example of where things are today with diffusion models, we've moved away from the generative adversarial network model. This is the quality of images you're now getting from AI. And I think it has even improved past this when this presentation was made. I don't know if anyone remembers, but there was once a time where the concept of AI we were exploring was Revit generative design, where you could take different layouts in Revit and weight them by preference, and then that would give you your preferred maybe furniture arrangement. This was, for me, my first introduction into AI, and I think I was exploring this even as far back as when I worked in ATO. So it's really been a long journey. And I think my point is, if there's anyone who is still a skeptic as to AI being a phase or a fad, we've moved way past that. We've had previous phases where this is now the point of real inflection. And so it's not likely to go away. If anything, what will happen is the world will sort of rise to creating more policies around how we expect AI to function in our lives. So just some examples of things we're doing. I know that everyone knows AI can make images. So we've been using AI to do renders. This is from a particular tool called NML AI. It has some free credits online if you're interested in trying. And with this, all you have to do is upload an image of your Revit model and a prompt, and you're able to get some good images from it. We're also using a tool called Veras, which comes as a plugin into Revit, and it will read your Revit model and take sort of a similar screenshot, and you can use that to create renders of different styles at different scales. Veras is also compatible with Forma, which I think Mr. Aderele mentioned, and also SketchUp. So it's one of the more popular ones in the industry because of its compatibility with so many tools. However, if I may say, it's not the most impressive renderer in terms of AI that I have seen, but I think its compatibility with tools is the selling point, and so many people continue to use it. The best way to get a prompt is to ask AI to generate your prompt. As a human writing for a machine, there's just too many things to consider that you may not use in your daily way of communicating. In terms of Forma, which was mentioned earlier, we've explored that as well. It has a sort of site exploration tool that will create different masses based on a site outline that is provided. And this is usually helpful for more urban scale intervention, where you're able to place different units on the site and see the relative positioning. And because, like I mentioned, Veras is an add-on to Forma, you can actually quickly go from conceptual mass to render in like 10 minutes, depending on how quickly you need to produce something. So for anyone who already has an active Autodesk subscription and you're getting these tools for free, I think it's very useful for our climate if you need to do a very rough, very quick idea proposal, and definitely worth exploring. Other things that we've looked into is using AI where an image is the base of the design, and then we can explore different scales. So urban scale interventions at different scales using AI is something that I've investigated. Sorry, I skipped an image there, but this is one example of that same image at a different scale of design and an even more zoomed out scale of design. So this one was interesting because it was all image to image workflow, but by controlling the prompts, like I mentioned earlier, you're able to control which aspects of the image you are iterating and then use it as the basis of design. So this is one example as well of using the same image for material exploration. So the image becomes almost like the sketch that forms the basis of different material explorations that you can engage with. And AI is also really impressively capable of generating 3D models at the moment. One of the more preferred ones is called Meshi AI. and it will take an image or a prompt and generate a 3D model from that. These 3D models, I must mention, are not necessarily suitable for Revit, which is something that I did test. They are more for the Lumion Enscape 3D asset workflow where you just need a mesh. If you're someone who works with Rhino, then they could be useful, but they're not necessarily suitable for the Revit environment because of how dense they tend to come out. But in terms of AI outputs, I would say the 3Ds are close to perfect, more so even than the images or videos. And speaking of videos, that is also something that has significantly improved. The only limitation at the moment is that most tools are only creating 8 seconds worth of video. But moving on to AI for BIM, which is a more, legally speaking, more impact than a render or video, because the construction document is something that we are responsible for. There are tools like Finch 3D, although they specialize in residential and hospitality projects, but they do have an AI that will generate algorithms that create a convincing floor plan based on the position of your openings and your vertical circulation, which is your stairs and your lifts and those sort of things. Finch is probably the most impressive AI tool I've seen, just because they combined the generative AI that we have with the initial generative algorithm of AI that could generate floor plans. And as far as tools that are ready to go, I think they're one of the few that you can get a reliable Revit-ready model floor plan with furniture layouts. And I think they're even working on annotations like dimensions and so on. And it's all AI generated. They have many demos of their tool online. So if you're interested in this, I highly recommend you check them out. There's also DTO or D.TO that is offering AI for detail creation. What they are proposing is a system that will recognize your model in a section and based on your detail library, generate something that you can immediately transfer into Revit and use as the starting point for details. And then finally, but not less important, there is the MCP, which is a feature that Autodesk announced in Autodesk University recently that they will be rolling out soon. So I'm sure it will be coming your way soon. But basically, this is a system that lets you connect to the back end of a tool. But in real terms, what that means is there's a possibility of chatting with your software so that you can model through chat as opposed to by clicking. At the moment, there are many explorations, even in our company, of this particular system because it's something that we found to be very useful. However, I think most of the MCP-related tools only support heavy data retrieval. So things actually using it to model. But this is something I think a lot of interest has been in terms of BIM, and it will keep developing as. So a little bit about limitations of AI, because I've talked about what AI can do, but AI at the time this was created was really bad with textual output. So when you ask for an image and it has text on it, it's really hard to get good text. It has since changed with the latest Google Nano Banana Pro, if anyone is following the trend. But there was a really long stretch of time. It's also bad at what I call use of hands. Whenever AI has to use its hands to do something, that's where you start to see the gap. They're all holding pencils and touching the paper, but they can't draw for some reason. They can't hold tools very well. If you've seen those very strange videos online, they can't eat very well. So if you're trying to spot if a video is real or fake, always watch for the hands. They are no longer having 8 or 10 fingers that used to be the case with the early AI outputs, but they're still really bad at using hands to do things. And also mathematical calculations, because AI is really estimating the response. It is not giving you, if you ask 2 plus 2, it's not actually adding 2 plus 2 to give you 4. It's checking its database to say what is the probability that 2 plus 2 is 4. And so if you're doing things like quantities or any mathematical sort of exploration with AI, it's very difficult to get accuracy. And so that's just something to watch out for. So a bit of the tools that I've explored and looking to explore both in-house and in other avenues are this mind map here, which I think you can all take screenshots of or photos of if you're interested in looking more into the different tools that are available. But this is just scratching the surface and just goes to show you that the AI market in terms of tools is exploding rapidly. and it's already here to stay. So it's worth everyone just investing some time to see how it can be useful for their respective use cases. I will just quickly touch on ethics and safety in AI usage because the risks of AI are not spoken about enough as much as the benefits. The first country to come up with an AI Act was the EU, and they have sort of formed the basis for other countries in terms of AI policy and regulation. And there are many things in here about prohibited AI practices, high-risk AI systems, disclosure, and things people should say when they use AI. And the Canadian government has sort of built upon that with the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act. Some key causes here that affect most of the people in this room are that businesses should identify and address risks of AI systems. So where is the data going? Where is the client data going to be hosted? And what are they doing with that information? Are there any risks that the AI is creating? One of the risks for some AI systems is that it can be discriminatory based on race or gender or income, because again, it is built on training data that often has some of these biases included. For our context, some of these things are less significant. However, because the data is universal, it's global, we may be reinforcing stereotypes unknowingly or knowingly. And so we should all be sort of aware of what happens when we engage with AI, not necessarily in the same way as maybe people in Canada, but we should all just have a collective awareness that what we represent for Nigeria, as an example, with the AI systems will go to someone who isn't in Nigeria. And then there's also things like allocative harm, quality of service harm, representational harm, social system harm, different like key AI harms that have been identified. But more commonly, the biggest harm for AI is the increase in dependency and parasocial relationship forming with AI tools. Again, maybe not so common with people in Nigeria, but there are people here who have very deep and very disturbing relationships with AI tools. And for people who have children, it's really worth checking that these sort of things don't happen, as there has been already a suicide that ChatGPT sort of provided the student with instructions on how to carry out a successful suicide, and it has been a big issue. So just for general safety, it's worth mentioning. There's also over and or under correction of biases. So sometimes we have AI tools that are too woke, as it were, and AI tools that are too biased. So if you ask for an image in the Middle East, for example, you always get conflict and war. One of, honestly, my first reasons for engaging with AI as far back as 2020 is when I heard it was going to be trained on the internet data. My first thought was, how is this representing Nigerians? Because many people don't upload things. We download and we watch, but we don't necessarily upload as much. So how are we being represented, and what are the stereotypes that are being reinforced? And you'd be surprised that even as of 2025, there's still a lot of stereotype with many of these AI tools. So it's worth, being more vocal if we start to identify these things. Like Faisal rightly said, we need to get engaged in this conversation so that things don't escalate in the negative sense. And there's also drift and knowledge cutoff, where you start to depend on AI for knowledge, but it has been cut off in its training model. And so you're only getting knowledge up to a certain point and using that as the latest. So it's also something to watch out for. Also, when you prompt, you don't need to say, please, thank you, or speak to it like a person, because for every prompt, there is a power cost. These are things that are being managed in data centers, and there's a lot of concern that there is not enough power in the world to actually power all of these AI systems that we want. So just in terms of responsibility, please be sort of concise with your prompts, because it doesn't really matter. The chat bot will take any phrase you give it and give you an outcome that you want. There are many people looking into this, AI safety organizations coming up. I don't think any of them are within the Nigeria or African context, but I will say that AI affects everyone globally in the same ways, more so than any other technology that we've had. So I think within our own respective confines or organizations, it's really worth bringing up discussions around regulation or safety when it comes to AI, because there is a lot of harm that could come about when it starts to take shape. And AI safety should address any sort of unintended consequences, biases. Security breaches is a really big one. Many of these tools that are coded with AI have sort of malware hard-coded in it, because some people are exploiting the database and putting malware in them. So you could think you have a tool you built with AI, but there's already access to your data. So it's really worth being more cybersecurity aware than we've ever been with all of these AI systems. So I'll end with a simple checklist for using AI responsibly. Always disclose your use of AI, especially if you're going to share it to someone maybe outside of Nigeria, because there are systems here that are checking if it's AI or not AI. People are not as fond of AI as maybe we might imagine. Most people are quite unhappy with it, if I'm being very frank. So it's always worth disclosing if you have used AI. Evaluate any content for accuracy, consider the implication, and always check your apps. And by that, I mean check your Gmail, check your LinkedIn, check your Facebook. Most of these apps have training turned on where they're already training their applications with your data. So just a word to everyone is to check all of your apps. And if you don't want it training on your data, turn it off. I know that security is dead, as Mr. Derele said, but if you are still someone who prefers to keep things off of the World Wide Web, then it's worth being more vigilant than you ever have been. Thank you all so much for listening. I know that went on a bit longer, but I hope that you gained one or two things. And I'll put a link in the chat to an AI course that I'm developing. Thank you.
Yeah. If you have any questions, we are going to
Thank you very much, Victoria.
Thank you.
Particularly for getting up so early.
Anything for my old stomping ground.
Thank you. So that was very comprehensive. Thank you so much. There's really very little that you didn't cover. The only thing that I would just highlight, and it was very interesting when you said that simple please and thank you in our prompting is draining data. Because here, as you know, in Nigeria, since we've been told that we should treat them more as our assistants, it's likely that our prompting will first start by saying, thank you for yesterday, how is your family doing, etc. So on a serious note, though, now that everyone is advocating that we use AI to the max, there's a huge amount of data being generated. And it's not surprising that data centers are being built left, right, and center. But from a sustainability point of view, I didn't hear much about how we can still save our precious planet when we're going to be generating tons and tons of data and prompting now for everything, including what we want to eat, what we want to sketch, trying to do so much. So what is the way out so that we don't end up probably going into extinction, because there will be so much power being used, hopefully renewable, but a lot of data being generated minute by minute, second by second. So I don't know if you can just tell us a bit about how we build some sustainability into all this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a very good question, and one that I hope we all start collectively asking more seriously. Unfortunately, I don't have a solution, because I've been in rooms where representatives from the Minister of Innovation in Canada, where they are the ones regulating AI and creating rules around AI. And they've been asked this question, and I haven't heard a convincing answer either. I will just highlight the challenge. So currently, there is a lot of physical infrastructure in terms of data centers being built to support AI. So the actual buildings will be built. However, the power required, if I've been very honest, conversations I've sat in on, the power does not exist. We can't really power the amount of data that we need. And so not only in terms of sustainability, which is more important, but also in terms of the promise versus reality, because the promise of AI is that we'll all be able to use it, we'll all have access to it. But if the world cannot really power everyone being that online and that dependent on these data centers to work, that means some people will be cut off. And historically, we all know where the cuts start, right? And where the limits and the bans start. So I think it's a very serious question that unfortunately I don't have an answer to, but it's one that I've been paying attention to the trends so that if there is some progress, I'm aware of it. The only other thing I heard from one of the speakers at Stanford LLM's University, which is also something worth mentioning, Stanford posts mind-blowing. So if you want to learn more, I highly recommend checking out their channel. But he did mention that AI in terms of power usage is still not as high as aviation. So flights still cost a lot more than AI, which means in terms of global concern, people are not really as concerned about AI because it's not still overshadowing the impact to the planet like aviation. So those are just stats and trends, but I don't think anyone has come up with a convincing answer at the moment, fortunately.
Sorry, because the clients most times wouldn't want maybe your design of their, let's say, their private quarters, their security room is exposed out there, and everybody knows where he's going to run into if there's any problem. So what do we do to protect our data, to protect our designs, protect ourselves?
Thank you. And hello, Mrs. Igumbo. It's been a long
Hi,
time.
Victoria. Nice to hear from you again.
It's always. So, the first thing many companies are now doing is requiring these software vendors to give a certificate of security. So, as an example, I know that many people who pay for SharePoint in Nigeria, you have Outlook, PowerPoint, and all of those tools. The Copilot that comes with SharePoint has a security certificate, which is why many companies, including ours, trust it. So just to give you a picture of what we are doing, ChatGPT is banned on all our office computers. Any other AI, Claude, and all the rest, all banned. You cannot use them. You can't paste anything in them. You can only use Copilot. The reason being, I think Microsoft has provided some form of documentation to support that. But when it comes to drawings, it's a little different because, firstly, your designs may not be as unique as you can imagine. So one of the biggest issues when AI first came out is artists claimed that AI was stealing their work, as an example. I don't think that claim went with any traction. Most people did not address the concerns in the end. But that's because design is very subjective. The design for a specific layout is not unique to that building. So it could be any building. However, I think there's something to say for putting an entire construction set with AI. You could maybe use a portion. So like the renders that I showed, they could be the exterior of any building. There's not a uniqueness in some ways. There is concern again when maybe firms that are very bespoke, like the Zaha Hadids and the rest of them that have this unique style, people are already using their style to create images. However, those firms, because they're very tech forward, are supportive. They actually want to have more data out there. So it will be depending on the firm and the comfort with putting your creative intellectual property on the web. I don't know that there is a solution if you want to engage with AI, because as much as the tools promise privacy, you can't really tell. I know that Finch 3D, which was the tool I showed, it's an in-house tool where you're generating designs for yourself. It's not going to train on the web. So it's more of demanding more from any software or software vendor to say, how are you protecting my data and what exactly are you doing with my data? Because as are building AI systems on top of their existing solutions, Sage, any tool, not just architecture, they're all now in this AI race to have an AI add-on. So I think companies should demand from them some sort of trust or documentation to say, like, this is the safety we've put in place for your data. So I hope that sort of answered the question.